your packet there is a copy of the PowerPoint presentation that was utilized with the City Council on December 13th. So as you summarize, I don't intend to go through all of that in deference to your time, and also hit the high points. What came out of it was that all parties have an interest in pursuing economic development in the best interest of the city of Bastrop. But there's disconnects in the alignment of the different 5 areas. There's difference of views. Among the board members, there's some view that the city is indeed some part of the problem, a big part of the problem. There's also a common understanding in need for alignment as a part of the goals of all the parties, and there's a desire for all parties to meet on a more regular basis to move things forward. As council's looking at it, and part of that outcome of that was there's a desire to ensure the council has done its part, provide the board with its expectations, to provide the guidance so that the board can be successful in responding and providing some strategic objectives to the council. Some of the observations from the vision, however, were included that council sees a desire to have a more detailed return on investment. How do you measure success? Qualitative, quantitative, direct, indirect. What are the means by which projects can be measured from a successful standpoint? Not that it might be on a case-by-case basis, but that each project is looked at. There's a desire to see commercial growth along the 71 corridor. There's a desire to see the business park completed. One of the interesting that came out of it was that no one brought up the economic development strategic plan that the board had as one of the ways you measure success, or the goals and objectives you have for measuring success. The plan is there. That's not something that really came out. How you then take that strategic plan and turn it into your annual plan of work, that turns into your budget, that turns into your resource allocation. From people's
Let me just, if I could, you had, if I'm not mistaken, received many documents before you started the interviews. Is that correct? And in all of those documents, did you receive all of that information that you've just read about?
Yes, ma'am, I did. That was not my point.
The point was, when I asked in the interviews, help me define success. If you came back, how would you define success? No one referred to those plans, though they exist, as the means by which you define success. No one says, well, how do you define success? Well, in our plan has these as our objectives. So I'm not suggesting I did not get the plan. What I'm telling you is in the interviews, no one referred to those documents as the means for measuring success.
Okay, that makes sense. I would love to take a moment on the interviews and the process of the interviews, because each one of us went through an interview, and I believe we would like to share back some of our observations about the interviews. I think my primary concern when trying to put together observations is the fact that there was not a set of questions by which everybody was guided through the interview. So it became very improvised, it became very random. And so I'd really like to hear from others on the board about the interview process, because if the interview process is not really getting to the information we need, then it's hard to really evaluate moving forward. But I think it's important that we share back. So I'm going to open it up for others on the dais to discuss the interview process.
So I'm happy to start that conversation. I was a little bit startled by the fact that there wasn't a set level of questions that everybody was asked. It seemed very informal, it seemed very subjective. It was also combative. I was a little bit surprised by that. I was expecting everybody to get a set level of questions. With the level of questions that are received, it gives us an opportunity to evaluate, think about, to your point, what are we referring to as a collective, so that we get consistency in what is actually returned during the interview process. That did not occur.
Okay, anybody else want to add anything about it?
Yeah, I think, all these are difficult when you're drawing different viewpoints or trying to achieve, input from groups. It's not always easy. I have done it in corporate. It's been done to me in corporate, and it was done to me again here this time, as they're trying to achieve a result defined by the original scope. I think one of the things that are most disappointing is that when we highlighted the point that our director is an interim director and has not been here that long, and we made a statement that said that the staff should be included in this, that was actually rejected. When I mentioned that to you, I don't think you were quite aware of that, but I know that Paul had commented that it was duly noted when comments about staff to be included, and in the end, you did not include any of the staff, which are the long-term members of the organization, which actually have the tools on a day-to-day basis, and actually are the ones that actually do things that you said are missing, such as the economic evaluation and analysis. That they do an extensive amount of that. If only the scope had, as suggested, included the staff members. And you know, it's not my position to turn around and say the staff members must be there, because from what I understand, this was contracted by the city, and so we thought that that approach was going to be done, but apparently that was not. Catherine?
I just thought it was important for at least us to share what we felt in regards to the interview. Ms. Young, would you like to add any comments about the interview process?
I don't recall being asked about how we measured success, but I did, during my interview, I did respond that when we vet projects, we begin with the strategic plan and the targeted industries, and that the companies that we speak with or prospects we speak with generally fall within those categories in the strategic plan. I was also asked some, I think, subjective questions as to what I thought about trust between the city and the board, or the EDC, the corporation. And I too would like to have seen the other staff members interviewed, because they are a wealth of information. One of them has been here for 13 years and one of them has been here for 6 years.
Anything else?
Maybe not right now.
Okay, wonderful. Appreciate the feedback. It's always good to get comments back from individuals that you interact with. So thank you so much. Trying to pick back up where I was at. We talked about performance measures. We talked about a number of things. I would suggest to you, and one of the things I will comment on, is I understand that you weren't provided a list of questions, and we had that conversation. The list of questions I used was common across all of them. I understand you did not have them ahead of time. There's a number of ways that you can do things. That does not say to make it right or wrong. You may have a preference one way or the other, and I appreciate that it was not a way that you preferred, and to do that I apologize. But all the questions that I utilized were the same across individuals. There's a lack of established means of measuring benefits. I appreciate what was said. However, when I did question those items, how do you measure, when I talked about return on investment, there was more general nature. Oftentimes you will see measurements of different means by which it may be a 10.5% rate of return from a financial measurement. It may be we're looking to hit different points, but there are typically things that are articulated that are common. There are typically sheets that you go through, There are typically checklists that are accomplished to see how you measure the project. Is it meeting your objectives? What are the things that you're seeking when you're looking to attract a project? One of the things that also came out was that there is a tension between the city and the EDC.
Excuse me, before we move on to the second one,
Okay.
exactly my comments were related to that. The detailed analysis, the analysis that are done both on economic, job performance, number of jobs, average salaries, the amount of benefits that were going in, are all detailed analysis that are done by the staff on a regular basis with every project before it is even brought forward, and it is done at the staff level. It's not done at the board level. The board does not do the detailed analysis. That's what the staff of the BEDC is in charge with and empowered to do, and they do that on a regular basis. Unfortunately, because your review did not include them, that part appears to be missing.
That was not,
So-
that was not the nature of the question, nor do I accept that as a response for this reason. When you're asking the question, when a board makes a determination, they need to know if there is a return on investment, what that return on investment is.
And that's
If you're-
analyzed on every project, and each
So the staff
individual
review-
projects that are prepared, and that's part of the packages of information that is actually shared with the board on a basis, but that wasn't captured.
Sure. So the outcome of the discussion with the city council was the desire to move forward the policy that provided the information from the council to the board, that provided to recognize, that recognized the respective roles of the two different entities, the responsibilities of the different entities, the desired outcome to build on the foundation documents that presently exist from the city. For example, your comprehensive land use plans, your regulations. How do you move forward with an economic development program that the city has a set of goals and objectives it's trying to accomplish? The board is helping the city accomplish that. The city also has an economic development program recognizing that the EDC is a critical component of that, but there are elements of the city's effort that go beyond that. The Main Street program is one of those examples. So the program, the policy will also include, affirms the city's commitment toward the board, the intent, the priorities that the city's seeking to accomplish, the intent to have quarterly meetings with the board to ensure that there's open communication, that there are goals that are communicated to the board for those expectations on what the return on investment is and how do you measure success and how you can then demonstrate that to the community itself. The scope, the expectations for coordination of projects so that a project does not get to a point where there could be conflicts with zoning, where there could be conflict with utilities, that there's information that's shared, open lines of communications.
So let's talk about communication for a minute. It's my understanding there are bi-monthly meetings, bi-weekly meetings with the city staff, city manager, and assistant city manager, at which time you cover all of the things that you've just listed, because it's virtually impossible to even look at a project until you've met with the city to determine some of the criteria. So would you like, Janora, would you like to address a little bit of your bi-weekly meetings to give us an indication of what you communicate with, or what do they accomplish or not accomplish? Because if that's where the information is supposed to be coming across, if you're meeting, one would hope that you're accomplishing something. Just kind of walk us through what those look like.
Well, generally, we receive an agenda, a very informal agenda from the assistant city manager, and when I say we, the EDC staff, which is Jean and I are the ones who generally meet with the city manager and the assistant city manager, Trey Job, and we'll receive an agenda from them asking if we have anything to add to that agenda, and oftentimes we do, but oftentimes what's on the agenda is already what we were going to discuss. When we do discuss in those meetings, it sometimes is specific to projects, but when we have a project come to us, Jean will contact the assistant city manager or the planning department, or she will put the project in contact with the city. And there again, and this is subjective on my part, but I do think it would have been very beneficial to have had Jean and Angela interviewed, because they've been through these processes far longer than I have. But I do know, since I've been here in since May of last year, 2021, I've witnessed Jean and Angela both reach out to the city regarding projects and giving as much detail as they possibly can without betraying confidentiality, and asking specifics about ordinances, zoning requirements that would impact those projects. And then we do discuss that oftentimes in the meetings with the city manager and the assistant city manager. I will say on the Main Street project, I've met 4 times with the city to try and come up with an agreement. I met with the city manager twice. I met with he and the assistant city manager, Rebecca Gleason, once. I've met with her once, and I've tried to get an agreement drafted and I met with resistance on even whether an agreement was required or not. And I was asked to go back to our attorney and ask again if an agreement was required, which I did. And so that's when we drafted the agreement, presented it to you, the board, to vote on. You all approved it, and we then sent it over the next day to the city manager's office. And we have not received it signed yet.
We would love to play an active role in Main Street. We think it's probably one of the most important things for the city of Bastrop. It could be a showcase. We're more than happy to provide the $50,000 that was asked for. However, there needs to be an agreement signed. I really want to point out that anything that the city has come to us on in regards to the capital improvement plan, we agreed on all of them. So when I think of, except for the $10 million bridge, which we're not even sure that we can do. So I'm not sure in your report, when you say utilize the full range of authorized uses, we are very agreeable to working with the city. However, that does not mean that the city can transfer money over to their account without an agreement. There seems to be a pattern that has developed recently whereby either there's no agreement and money is transferred over, there is a contract put before the city council that is not valid, the Schneider contract for the broadband study. It did not have any BEDC agreement for those funds, so therefore it wasn't valid. But because I realized the importance of it, put together a performance agreement so that it would all be kosher and we'd have an audit trail. But then we recently had another one with Kimley Horn, and 4 times we discussed that that should not be an agenda item because we had not awarded the project yet. I'm very concerned about the fiduciary integrity being jeopardized, not only for the city, but also for the BEDC. I know we're not a checks and balances. However, thank goodness that we are able to stop things being transferred over by either people not being informed or possibly and just an overreach of funds. So I just want to point that out. You know, you asked in my interview, was there ever anything that was illegal? And I think I brought up the Main Street situation, but you said, well, there would be lawsuits if it was illegal. And I said, oh, we always have lawsuits. But I wanted to point out to you that this is not an inference. These are paper trails that cause concern, and it's a pattern. And so therefore, when we look at working with the city and we're going through this document, I just want to make sure that we all get on the same page about a process. The process is probably the most important thing here.
And that's one of the things we're talking about, is that the city creates an economic development sales tax to accomplish an economic development objectives of the community. That program is oftentimes part of a larger effort, one of those components. The city council, by statute, appoints the boards, approves your budgets. There are some that say the EDCs are not tools of the city's economic development efforts. I would argue that that's insane. You are a part of the city's economic, you are a tool. But there's a process to go through. And one of those things, and I appreciate the conversation we're having this evening because you're highlighting some of the stress that gets out this. What I keep hearing as an outsider coming here is that this board does everything correctly and the city doesn't do anything correctly. In fact, Madam Chair, you'll recall in our interview, I also asked you, what does the city do well? And you couldn't think of one thing that the city did properly. And that is a problem.
Wait a minute, I said they did great recreation. Do you recall that?
No, I don't.
That's too bad. That was I had to think about it, but I did say they got a great recreation program.
But the EDC exists to be a partner with the city. And when you're like this, when people come to a community to look at economic development effort, they don't see a difference between the EDC and the city. And when there's this conflict, that does not send a positive message. It's easy to find things where you say you should have done this better, you should have done that better, you should have done this, I would have expected that. But the outcome that we're seeking here is for everyone to get on the same page, and there are issues that need to be worked through. What we're trying to accomplish is for the City Council to provide you strategic guidance so that you can be more successful. I would think that would be something that you'd be looking for.
Okay. As I look at the comments and process of systems and what you're emphasizing right now, the first statement that says a pattern of limited coordination and timely sharing of information with the city. Now, you've also heard a regular basis, on a 2-week basis, open communication from the staff, which were not interviewed, and communication with the city on a regular basis. And so in this point, when you look at this process, you know, again, I don't know how you would get to that conclusion with the things that you've heard here as well, that there is not timely and there is not coordinated communication when there is. The second is when project assessment is on an ad hoc basis. I have no idea how you would come up with that as an observation, as a project assessment, which is done by the staff on a regular basis. And they have their processes and calculations in order to assess those, including, as the director said, the pre-review of those, which they do at the staff level before it comes up. So then I'm having a tough time understanding how project assessment is on an ad hoc basis when there is routine activities that have been going on for years by the staff that has been in place for years, when the director is an interim director and the board is on generally 2-year terms, not necessarily, definitely don't have the seniority of that. So again, when I look at this and know how it was used and how you presented it, or it was used by the presentation with the city council, I could only imagine reading this going, what a bunch of knuckleheads up there, they're not even doing anything. When you look at that, that's such a basic statement, but yes, it's a basic process that happens, quite misleading in the presentation.
Well, I don't agree with you, and I'll tell you why. Because one of the things I asked in my conversation with your interim executive director was, what forms do you use? What consistency? And they didn't exist. Now, recognizing that she's interim, but I would assume if you're a successful functioning executive director, interim or not, you would have access to a common checklist and other items. It's not my intent to have a debate with you this evening about these items. The reality of it is that if you strengthen, I came here with the opportunity to provide you with feedback of what had been presented to council and where things are going. The goal is to strengthen these items, and we're having a debate about what has been done, what was done wrong here, what was done right there, and how this should have been done better. The reality of it is, if the council comes back and says, here's what we'd like to see from a process. We'd like to see a checklist. Does one exist? If you have one, here it is. If you don't, create one. Just as an example. So there are a number of things that could do to strengthen the relationship that my observation, quite honestly, from my first conversation here to this one, to the board meetings that I've observed, it's a very combative process with the board suggesting that the city's not really trying to help them out, and I don't see that. I see this entire process as the council providing the board with additional information to become successful. That's where I see this going. And you can take that as negative as you want to in those comments. No one said in my presentation, I never said the board's a bunch of knuckleheads. I said there's opportunities to improve. And I challenge you that anyone can't improve. I can certainly improve.
I don't believe we're talking about whether we're improving or not, or looking at incremental changes. It's when you state certain items that are not true in your presentation to the city council. That's where I'm most concerned. And when we had the original discussion of this, and I think that Mr. Hoffman was there as well, that we said when this was consolidated and reviewed, a lot of these things could be reviewed and prepared so that they were accurate and accurately reflected with the city. And that was disregarded as well, that there was not a member from the BEDC in helping to consolidate this, to clear off these, let's say, observations in error that are based on procedures or processes that are done by the staff when the staff are not even included in that discussion. So again, I'm conflicted with how it began, tried to suggest ways to improve it, and those were disregarded. And then I see what is presented and going, well, that's kind of what I expected would come about from this, and it succeeded what I expected. But anticipating and trying to help bring this together as a cooperative effort instead of a directive is what that intention of that comment from months ago, which you would remember when I made that comment at the meeting. And again, I think the comment was duly noted, but nothing much done past that.
Thank you.
And just, we can always improve, everybody can always improve. And I'm sure with the documents that we provided for you, you saw that in our work for this year, one of the things we wanted to do was become more operationally sound. So, you know, the forms and that sort of thing. We do have a consistent form that is presented on all projects that has a return on investment, et cetera. So I'm, you know, operationally, I think we can always get better. We can always work smarter, not harder. We can always manage up. We can always provide a form that fits into a city council report that everything, you know, is aligned and looks great. So I'm not ever going to say that we're doing the best we can, but I think we're doing a pretty good job. And I think that when you review what has been accomplished, it's really been amazing. The number of projects and accomplishments that have been accomplished over, certainly since I've been on the board, and you know, somebody might want to speak a little bit to that. I did have one other thought, but I can't, it's not coming to me right now. It was something you said, Bill, but I don't remember what it was, but it'll come to me, I'm sure.
And I think one of the policy directives, Madam Chair, that when you talk about, or it was referenced earlier, agreements, is some of the expectations of the city on who manages capital projects. So that I believe that will also be included in the project or in the policy as the expectation of how things are moved forward through a process for capital improvement projects.
I think we really want to talk about that a little bit. That's certainly not the precedent that we've operated on. I think we very successfully built Agnes Street. That was not a city capital. I don't know, I don't understand the basis of having the city do all the capital. And Bill, maybe you have something to say about that. I know that
Madam Chair, it's worth noting that on Agnes that we're in a lawsuit because the right-of-way, the contract that BEDC executed didn't have follow-up on it, so that right-of-way wasn't finally signed off. So the last thing that I think is productive is to have a tit for tat and you didn't call and you did call, because again, I think each of us has an opportunity to improve, and I don't think anyone is 100% without fault on either side. So I think it would be more productive to talk about how we move forward. Mr. Gossett, when you were appointed to the board, I remember being in more than one meeting and you were not satisfied with the documents that were coming forward and wanted to have consistent documents and wanted to know that all the information had been evaluated. And one of the documents that council discussed, and certainly as mayor, one of my expectations, whether you are an EDC board member or a council member, how wonderful it would be to have a document that had a signature of the EDC director and a signature of the city manager, so that a lot of these operational things that we're talking about are handled at the operational point. And to Mr. Gossett's point, which I completely agree with, I didn't appoint and council didn't confirm somebody to be on the board to do a deep dive financial analysis. That's why we have professional staff. But if that information was presented in a consistent manner, and if there was a sign-off, if you were on the EDC side, you would know, okay, our staff has looked at it, they're in agreement with this. If you're on the council side, okay, the city manager's looked at it and the EDC agrees with it. And I believe if such a document existed and if that was what we used going forward on future projects, we could avoid a whole lot of this conversation. And I believe that document could also have, there may be some points because EDCs have a different perspective than cities. And so if we could have a document of, we all agree on these 90% of the facts. This is the project, this is where it is, this is the financial return, this is the demand on the wastewater system, and yes, we have that. If there are a couple of items that people have a different perspective on, just state what those are. And then both the board and council could have an opportunity to review that and vote on that. So I don't think it's appropriate to go through a tit for tat. I'm sorry that folks were disappointed in the interview, but I want to step back from the forest fire, bad pun given what we went through last week, but that's been on my mind a lot lately. Step back and kind of do a big picture thing. I had a council member say to me, well, the reason we never had a policy direction before was because we had 3 council members sitting on the EDC board. So we didn't have to wonder what council wanted to do. There were 3 council members out of 7 sitting on the board. That changed in May, June of 2017 when we took council members off of the board. But what we did not do, which our EDC attorney pointed out very politely, is, well, you took the council members from off the board, you put very intelligent, very strong-willed, there's a few alpha A personalities on this board, and didn't do anything on policy direction. And so if this is, no one on council, to my knowledge, in any conversation that's ever taken place, was this intended to be a let's keep score and who's done something wrong. It was intended to be, council has not provided direction, and how do you know if you're playing the game in the best way possible if there's not consistent direction? It was never I know one of the words I keep hearing is directive. It's never said directive. It's always said direction. And I would really like to talk about how we move forward, because I think we can all agree there's an opportunity to improve in how we move forward.
Well, I believe it always said directive until recently it said direction. But thank you for
No,
going
ma'am.
into detail.
It's always said policy direction.
Not on my documents. But anyway, and thank you for going over, again, what I just finished saying, which is I think we need some operational cleanup, and documents are good. I think that's, and I'm sorry about the lawsuit, but I also have information on that. We did get that information to the city, which they said they would take care of it, so it really wasn't something that was dropped by the BEDC. We don't need to go down this road. We do want to improve. We have no problem working with council. I do think that we need to evaluate why the city would be in charge of all capital projects, and I think they should be putting their hat in the ring along with anybody else that we're considering for the job. I think it's a competitive process.
Madam Chair, board members, I appreciate your time this evening. Again, if you come back, the purpose of this is to improve the alignment between the economic development efforts undertaken by the Bastrop Economic Development Corporation and the City Council. There's change. Obviously, again, as an outsider, what I have seen is the competitiveness of y'all wanting to be equal. You're not equal with the council. And if the city wants to control the capital improvement project, that's common in a lot of other places. Many of the things that we're talking about are very commonplace. I've been doing this 30 years. And I've been doing it over 20 years in Texas, and I've dealt with 4As and 4Bs for a long time. And the things that I'm talking about are things that are common amongst a whole smear. Now, that does not mean that it's common across those where there's a separation where the staff is taken for the EDC and also with the cities. Why? Because you're all in it together. And what is of concern to me even this evening in the approach that y'all are taking, because I believe, and I told you, Madam Chair, at the time, I believe every single one of you from my meetings has the best interest of this city at heart. I also believe that you have strong personalities and you have desires that may differ on how you get there. The City Council, through this policy direction, is looking to provide guidance in their goals and how they would like these things accomplished. That may or may not agree with some of the things that you'd like to accomplish, but that doesn't make it wrong. And you may or may not agree with the manner in which I conducted the interviews and questions are not questioned. That doesn't make it wrong. The intent in this process has been positive, and I would encourage you to take it in that vein. And I appreciate your time today, and thank you so much, and I wish everyone well as you move forward. The idea with this is to go forward to City Council at the first meeting in February with a draft policy for their consideration. Amongst the points that I've mentioned this evening that they will be considering, to provide additional feedback, strategic direction to this board of what they're seeking to accomplish, to look at roles, responsibilities, accountability, expectations, performance measures, who handles capital projects, a wide variety of elements that I've articulated, which are also included in the points, and which you could see by reviewing the presentation to City Council from December 13th. Thank you again for your time.
Anybody else have any questions? Moving on. 3.4, discussion and possible action on amended performance agreement with Moca Ventures Nebraska, LLC.
Madam Chair and board members, I sent some information to you on Friday. You received in your packet an amended agreement which was provided to staff. After the board addressed the documents that we presented to you, the legal counsel for Moca came back and asked for two major things to be placed into the document, amend that document. One was a timeline by which the construction of the infrastructure or completion of infrastructure would be completed, and they recommended 24 months or agreed to 24 months. Angela, can you get to my slides, please? Okay, and then they wanted specific language regarding Moca's pro rata share of the infrastructure. There were some various other edits, but those were all minor edits, and our attorneys did not have issues with the small edits. It was those two major issues that instructed us to come back to the board. And what you have in front of you tonight is the document which was redlined by Moca's attorneys. And I believe our counsel is comfortable. Mr. Santee, do you have anything to add to what I've said? I believe that we are all agreeable and on the same page at this point, and staff would seek your approval for these amendments, so I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
What are the next steps for Moca if this is passed?
Well, there's some due diligence that they have to do on their part, which is to approach on the toad habitat. They must do some due diligence on that. They must also, I believe, come before the city with letters from the gas company and from LCRA regarding the right-of-ways and the easements there. And so they still have due diligence to do on that.
They'll do that before they purchase the land?
Actually, I think they're ready to close on the property. And so I think that's the board's pleasure if you want to see that information before you close or not.
Madam Chair, The exhibits aren't included, and I would like to know if the temporary access easement, is that executed, or are you still, do you need signatures on that?
There were some red lines on that as well, but they were minor, and our attorney said that there was no issue on that. We could execute that.
So it's not executed, it will be as
It will.
as a part of the contract? Is that where we are?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, there were no exhibits, so I couldn't tell.
Okay.
And I think just one clarification, and I think Mayor pointed this out earlier in the discussion about related to the comment that developer infrastructure cost means 50% of the cost of the design construction of a maximum of 400 linear feet. So we have the footage confirmed,
We do.
and which will begin the southern end of Jackson. But what it does say is, and to include all required utilities.
Correct.
Provided, however, the developer's share of cost shall not exceed $500,000. The utilities defined by the roadway would be the buried utilities, water, wastewater, and so forth, but not the overhead utilities. So we wouldn't be drawing the power lines to there, because the power lines actually come from overhead. Is that correct?
That is correct. Gene?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought we were doing all underground power now, or on new stuff. Is that not true?
Do what?
I thought we were doing all underground for.
That's what I wanted to, that's what I want to
That is
clarify, that
correct.
all,
Everything's underground.
okay.
Yep.
So it'll take the power to that point, it'll take fiber optic to that point, and water to that point.
Water, gas, fiber, electricity, yes.
Okay.
And wastewater, yeah.
Okay.
Kind of small, important piece.
Yeah, that's why I want to make sure that all was defined.
sir.
Yeah, got it.
And then, Mr. Gossett, I had asked you on page 66, what this agreement also says is that BEDC is paying 100% of the 350 feet that's north-south, that's the extension of Jackson.
Correct,
To bring us across the gas line to that southern unnamed road.
yes.
Yes, the EDC is responsible for those expenditures.
And that was always the case, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay, then do we need to vote on this, or you have your marching orders to,
I think you need to vote on this.
somebody like to make a motion? Just the first, it's just the first amended.
I move that we approve the first amended and revised economic development
Restated.
agreement. Oh, and restated, sorry. Agreement for the Moca Venture project.
I second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? No. Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know that's it. I've got several copies here, several iterations. Discussion and possible action on project management, engineering, and construction for the expansion of infrastructure in the Bastrop Business and Industrial Park. 3.5.
As you know, we have been in the process with the city of rezoning the property in the eastern portion of the business park, and the final approval is expected tomorrow night at city council meeting. It's already been through one meeting and approved there. As the BEDC presented December 14th to the city council, there are some next steps which staff needed to come back to the board for your direction, and one of those was to approve a professional services agreement with an engineering firm, approve the process for selecting your project manager or the project manager, and then the engineering firm would go through the bidding process and make recommendations for a construction company. And at that point, the board would take action on entering into an agreement with a construction firm. When we presented to City Council requesting the $1 million budget for this project, we made that very clear, and it was expressed by the council that they would like to see a bid process for the construction side of this process. And so, as an EDC, you do not have to go out for bids, but we indicated to the council that if that was their pleasure, I felt like the board would certainly embrace that and move forward with a bidding process. So with that in mind, these were our steps, and this is what I presented to City Council as our next steps to come back for the board. So that is why I'm here tonight, to seek your guidance and direction on where the engineering firm you would like to choose. You can go out for a request for qualifications on that if you would like to do that. Picking your project manager is also one of the things you need to look at, and then that process will follow. The process that will follow then would be the engineering firm would do the bidding process. The EDC would not. From a staff perspective, we have been working with Doucette Engineering on the rezoning side of it, and for us, it has been a very good process. They have been very responsive to us and giving us answers and getting back to us. And so from that perspective, I think staff would be happy to work with Doucette Engineering again, but that is a board decision, and if you want to do the request for qualifications, we can also do that.
Discussion?
Does staff have any reason they might want to look at some other engineering firms?
I just think that's a board perspective and what you would like to do. You don't necessarily have to go out for bids or for requests for qualifications. I think that's your decision. I'm strictly saying from the board side, from the staff side, we have worked closely with Doucette through this process. They're very familiar with the project, and the staff would be very happy to work with Doucette again.
Yeah, I agree. From the point of view of what they've been doing on the work on the layout and the development for the replatting and the zoning of this, I think it's okay to kind of keep going with them to do the professional services at the front end, and then proceed with a standard bidding process and project management selection process. I think is acceptable.
Okay. Can I hear a motion to move forward with that?
Madam Chair, before we have a motion, one of the things, there was a conversation about why would the city want to manage the capital projects, and for a lot of projects, the city's capital is involved in those projects, and the city's ultimately going to be accepting those projects. So there are times that there is a cost savings from doing that, and so that's one of the perspectives of why the city would do that. For instance, we don't pay ourselves review fees, and there are some fees that can be done. There's some time savings that can happen. Just for clarification, council did not ask for a bid of the engineers because we know that professional engineers, attorneys don't bid things. So that was not the request from council.
No, it was not.
Okay,
And
just
I'm
wanted
sorry
to
if that came
clarify
across,
that.
because that was not your, and generally
And
cities don't do
council
that.
had gone through a very extensive review of what staff had done with RFQs, had a matrix, got RFQs from a number of engineers, and had evaluated their capabilities, did checks on their references and that type of thing. And so that's why there are accepted vendors that have all the right insurance, all the right certifications. It's hiring an engineer is not just, it's a little more involved, which is why it's not a low bid, everybody engineers things exactly the same way. So I don't think there's, and I don't know if Doucette even turned in an RFQ. I don't have any opinion about them one way or another. But the agenda item says approve of professional services agreement with an engineering firm, and it mentions approve a process for selecting. And so I didn't know, is there a process for selecting the engineer, or is there only a process for selecting the project manager?
That's entirely up to the board.
So staff doesn't have a recommendation on that?
I made my recommendation, Director Schrader, and that is that the staff has enjoyed working with Doucette as the engineering firm.
And so I'm asking was there a process? Did we look at any other engineers? Or
No, we did not.
Okay, thank you.
No, we did not. And just to clarify, my statement was not that council asked us to go out for engineers. They did share their feelings that they would, with a $1 million expenditure on a project. The message I received that night, and I believe the language was that you would like to see a bid process for construction.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. In honoring that is what I'm presenting that to the board so that they can make their decision, because legally you do not have to go out for bids. But in an effort to work with the city, I do think it would be good for us to go through that process.
Okay. I don't know one engineer firm from the other, so that's, you know, it's a recommendation of the staff and the work that's been done, and it's, you know, I defer to the others on the board.
Yeah, I would make a motion to authorize the interim director to proceed with the process for selecting engineering firm and the project management.
Do I have a second?
Second.
So I'd like to make a comment before the vote. This is the very thing that we're hoping the policy direction will make this where we're not having this conversation. So it is my understanding from the meeting that I was in with Moca that time was of the essence and they are really wanting to move forward. So I don't want to do anything to stumble the need to move forward. So I'll be voting yes on this one, but I will also want us to comply with council policies moving forward on new projects.
Well, we'll have, the policy hasn't been voted on yet, has it? Yeah.
That's correct. That's what I'm saying. So right now, there is no policy, so, but I just want to clarify that there is policy coming, and it may change this process and hopefully make it easier and expedite it, because I know a common goal with council and BEDC is that when the developer comes in, that we're able to move things in a timely and efficient manner.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just have one question. So what we're, just to clarify, what we're authorizing here is to come up with a professional services agreement for DSET. Is that correct? Because we don't have one to vote on right now, isn't that right?
Correct.
All those in favor? Did I have a second? I did. All those in favor? Opposed? Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
So will that professional services agreement come back? That's the intention, it'll be on the next agenda? Excellent, thank you.
Yeah. 3.6, y'all want to knock that out? This is the BEDC staff before we go into an executive session. Go ahead.
I know that Angela is working diligently with the website, updating it. And Angela, do you have any comments on, don't you meet with them once a month?
Well, yes, every month we have a story written by them as part of our agreement with them. And the writer this time worked with both me and Jean to put together a year in review article. And I thought it turned out really nice. It was good to see everything we've accomplished in the last year in writing.
Thank you. The biweekly meetings will continue. We took a hiatus during the holidays, but I anticipate that we will start those back this week on Wednesdays and Wednesday afternoon. Obviously, the industrial park, we've discussed that already. I will tell you that we have the Colton project and the TA Bastrop project. Those contracts have been executed and are moving forward. And I asked Jean if she could give you an update on her workforce training. And I believe that is it for me. Thank you very much.
Good evening, board. Okay, so just kind of give you a really brief update on what we're doing with workforce education. The Art Institute has received a grant for $20,000 from the Hyatt Lost Pines, and basically it is a collective effort to address the worker skills shortage in the hospitality culinary industry. This program has been so successful that other resorts have actually started looking at the Art Institute so they can expand that beyond Bastrop, but we are very excited that the Hyatt Lost Pines did nominate them through their foundation to receive this grant to get some of our workers back to work or even at a higher level. So that is very exciting. And then for ACC and the workforce training programs, the trades programs at the farmers market, the city is currently working directly with ACC on finalizing the MOU for that. And we are trying to get that executed as quickly as possible. We were hoping to already have classes going, but agreements are agreements. We got to make sure they're good for everybody, so we're working through that process. Community Action is going to be teaching some classes out at Deep in the Heart Art Foundry, and they are in the process of, hopefully, fingers crossed, receiving their CO here pretty quick for that classroom space. And I will be connecting Community Actions with the owner of Deep in the Heart Art Foundry to start organizing and scheduling those classes so we can get that rolling. The other thing that we've been working on is Bastrop Isd. They have some really exciting programs going on. The P-TECH grant is opening the door for a manufacturing program that they hope to have launched by 2022. We are coordinating not only at the school district level, but also at the industry level to help kind of navigate those programs and really get them implemented and have students be able to earn certificate programming at the high school level and be able to literally go directly into the manufacturing industry and other types of industry from that program. And so we're kind of a conduit for the industry aspect of it, as well as just connectivity of understanding. The other meeting that took place actually today was with the Home Builders Association and David Weekley Homes to help structure the construction curriculum program that's at Cedar Creek High School to help make that a little bit more robust. As we all know, the home building industry is absolutely crazy in our region right now, and everybody is very desperate for workers. So we're trying to help, again, kind of navigate those conversations and connect those people to make that process happen. We have also had conversations with Seton, talking with them. Janora had a great conversation with them about their expansion that's in the process of going on, as well as I will be meeting with them in the next week and a half, I believe, to discuss educational and workforce training programs. And in conjunction with that, we are also in conversations with an additional university that I can't quite share with you just yet, but we're really excited. They will be, hopefully, fingers crossed if everything goes well, offering some 2-year and 4-year programs in a remote capacity in the community that are kind of above and beyond what we're offering today, that also fit into some of these additional industries where we don't quite have something that provides that. So we've got a lot going on. And furthermore, Youth Career Day is going to be April 20th. At the Convention Center this year. Believe it or not, the Performing Arts Center is so busy that we cannot get an entire full day there, which is great news that they've got that much programming going on. We will be expanding the Youth Career Day this year, and it will literally include kindergarten through 12th grade. So we're super excited that we'll have all levels of kind of that engagement with our industry, and all of those programmings will be very different. So we've got a lot going on. We're very excited about all of the educational opportunities for the community.
I've got a really quick question for you before
Yes.
you take off.
Yes.
Do you have any type of guesstimate is fine, related to the number of workforce opportunities in terms of education that you're targeting? So for instance, through these different programs that you're driving, we expect to educate and enable 1,000 potential learners or something along those lines. Do you have anything like that? Because I think that would be really impactful for individuals to know. We've got all these wonderful programs, but how many opportunities is it presenting?
Absolutely. So I'm going to start with the Youth Career Day portion of it. So that has been one of my questions for 5 or 6 years now, is we have no true way to track our success. So we are working with the new team at BISD to help define that. How do we capture that information because for them, it's important to capture as well for any additional granting, those types of things and programming that they want to implement. So it only helps them just as much as it helps us, and it helps us to really promote the opportunity. So with that, we are defining that this year. Because again, it's something that we haven't really had that was a tangible thing that we could come back and say, hey, we were successful. In regards to ACC, they will have 12 students per class. And those classes run anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks, depending on the program that is being taken. So HVAC, plumbing, electrical, et cetera. So those will vary, but 12 is kind of our cap for a single teacher to handle. The university that we're speaking to, that's actually their number as well. So once we define exactly what those programs will be, there'll be 12 students per class. So I guess yes and no is my answer to you, to be honest. As soon as we can get started and actually know what our defining numbers are, then yes, I can put that together for you all to provide kind of, hey, well, in this semester, we're going to be able to provide this class and graduate this many students.
Yeah, I think that would be really powerful, especially because it's that results, right? And also that drives more opportunity. Other businesses, industries look at it like what's happening with the Hyatt. And
That's
can we
right.
take advantage of a similar program, or can we initiate a similar program for job opportunity? So.
Yes, ma'am. No, I 100% agree with you, and I think it's going to be great to have those metrics put together once we can get started.
Jean, is there a minimum number of students for them to have the class?
12 is the minimum.
So if they don't get to, they can't take more than 12, and if they have 10, they won't have the class?
Yes, ma'am. Because
Okay.
you got to make the numbers work.
And I also want to share with the board that April Daniels reached out to me, and there is a U.S. Department of Commerce grant where they are focusing on IT, health, and skilled trades, and they were trying to get letters of support. And I want to give a shout out to Jace Jones because he wrote the letter and then also had as our the president of Seton here in Bastrop, and he has a larger area, and reached out to other hospitals in other areas because this goes across counties for them to write letters. And Director, Jen, what they were talked about for that grant was how many people would you hire? Do you have internships? What would you rate? And so that information was gathered at the same time, and I worked on that, and April's working on pulling that together. And that was a very cool one. What was different about that U.S. Department of Commerce grant is normally you have to, you may need to be unemployed, or you have to be at a certain socioeconomic to be qualified for it, and this, there's no strings attached. You have to, if you sign up, then
correct.
they will cover the cost of training. So I just wanted the board to know that I had been working on that as well.
So gathering how many students are going through the program is one metric, and a little bit more difficult of a metric is tracking them after they leave. And sometimes that's confidential information, and sometimes it's not. But I think if you think in advance to put together a way to capture that and begin the storytelling of them at their new job, it could reap some benefits. So think beyond how many you're getting in the class, but being able to set up some sort of network where you can track them and their successes and share those successes.
Yes, ma'am. And I also want to remind the board too that, we've talked about this a few times, but in conjunction with giving an update, is that we do have within our educational budget, we do have money set aside for some additional scholarships for students that may qualify. We haven't set those metrics yet, mainly because we, still trying to get the classes kind of up and going and rolling. So once we can kind of figure out what is going to be offered and when, we will start defining that criteria for that as well.
Do we have a time estimate of when out at the industrial park, when that classroom will be up and functional?
So my understanding in talking with the owner of that facility today is that he is hoping to have that CO in the next coming weeks. I believe they're just waiting on the final inspection.
And am I remembering correctly that there's fear that you can't get 12 people in that space, or?
No, ma'am, there is enough space to do internal classes of 12 people. It's the external space that was the challenge.
Hence the need to go across the
Correct.
street? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
But that is another asset that BEDC has access to.
Yes, ma'am. So we can really use that, I mean, it could be community actions, it could be ACC, it could be really anybody that would have any educational workforce training programs could use that facility over there. Any additional questions? Oop.
Yeah, one real quick. The ERS workforce stuff reminded me, a few months ago, we had the workshop on labor, where I know we discussed labor participation rate. And have we made any progress on trying to figure out why Bastrop lags behind on that one? Bastrop County.
I think that's the million-dollar question at this point. You know, we continue to review different labor sources and information, and there is no defining thing that like sticks out that says why Bastrop is different than everybody else.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
4.1, the Bastrop EDC Board of Directors will meet in a closed executive session pursuant to the Texas Government Code, Chapter 551, to discuss the following: 1, Sections 551.072 and 551.087, deliberation regarding the commercial and financial information, as well as the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property received on projects R2, D2, and Walk of Fame, and Section 2, Section 551.074, personnel matters, discussion on chief executive officer position. The time is 6:10. Uh, 7:20, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We're adjourned at 7:21.
Second.
7:20.